Hi there, my name is Christina Tartaro. I am an account executive here at MSL, and I'm sitting with Rema Vasan. She runs the global P&G business here at MSL, and we are going to be talking about how to effectively communicate to women in today's world. Rema, what are some examples of things you think brands and people are doing to effectively communicate to women in today's world?
Well, Christina, I think that's a great question because I think today more so than ever before is a critical and very opportune time to reach women, given movements like Me Too and the very active discussion around salary parity between genders. There's just a lot of emphasis and focus that brands are now beginning to place on effectively reaching today's women. For example, a lot of brands activated around International Women's Day, Women's History Month, etc. But I think what's really critical is thinking about how do we reach women today in the most authentic and relatable way, using insights that are true and relevant to them. There was some surprising statistics around how women contribute to 85% of all consumer purchases. And by the way, you might presume that most of them are what you would consider typical traditional female purchases, but they actually contribute to 50% of traditional male purchases, things like automobiles, consumer electronics, home improvement products. So you're a millennial.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about how growing up as a millennial in today's world has impacted the way you think about how you communicate, how you design programs that target women.
Absolutely. So I think that I grew up in a time of digital transition, having that really insightful piece of information to drive a campaign, and then making sure that it's digestible and snackable. Working on accounts like a Girl, where we execute things globally and locally, I think that something universal is just that empowerment and that understanding of other cultures. And if you have that, I think that that's a great way to get in, and that's something that's just everyone can understand. So I think empowerment is definitely universal. So we talked a little bit about your global background, and then obviously as you work here at MSL, we're designing campaigns that are obviously run here on a national level, but can also be executed globally. So could you talk about some of the nuances that you see when it comes to doing a campaign locally and then trying to amplify it on a global level?
You mentioned Like a Girl previously. Yeah. I'd say that's a fantastic example of a campaign that's truly grounded in an insight that has been executed across several markets successfully around the world. I think we're all familiar with how it's been executed here in the United States very successfully. But I'd like to talk about the interesting way it's been adapted in China, for instance, this past year, where the specific local discovery is that young girls in China, in these Chinese villages, who the mothers, in order to make a living, go to the big cities, there's a real impact on these young girls when they approach puberty, because when they go through their first period, they have a real sense of isolation, not being with their mothers. And what we did really is that we actually documented their experience with this beautiful film, and we raised awareness around this issue of lack of confidence in these young girls going through puberty in these Chinese villages. And then we partnered with a charity in order to bring to light this issue and provided them with first period education and health information. And that was hugely impactful and successful, not just for the brand, but more importantly for the cause that we were bringing to life. So the point there is that it is possible to have fantastic global campaigns that are grounded in an overall insight, but then that's adapted in a way that's truly appropriate to the local market.
So now that we've talked about campaigns and your work here at MSL and globally, could you talk a little bit about people that inspire you?
So I will start with my mother. So my mother was born hearing impaired. I'm an only child, and unfortunately we lost my dad when she was in her 30s. I was a teenager at the time. And it was incredibly difficult for us because she, throughout her life, had really relied on my father and previous to that, her parents. She actually used it to fuel her strength. And not only did she bring me up into what is hopefully now a responsible adult, but equally actually started a volunteer organization to help hearing impaired women in need in India. She never once adopted a woe is me attitude or really retreated into, why is life so unfair? But she really took it upon herself to say, well, if this is a situation, then let me actually make the most of life. She traveled the world and she pursued all her passions. And I think what I really learned from that is truly nothing is impossible. That was her motto. And I think trying to bring that philosophy into my life every day, whether it's my work life or my personal life, like really being fearless, being committed, being authentic, and pursuing your passions, I think was something that was incredibly inspirational that I learned from my mother.
My dad, single dad, I'm also an only child, so learned that. But he was really just someone who pushed me to never give up on my dreams. Just think he's super inspiring in the way that he is so selfless and he just wants everything good for me. And I think that that's something I try to emulate as well, is just making sure that, well, yes, I'm taking care of myself, but I'm making sure that everyone around me is also well taken care of. And I think that's a really great trait.
Let me ask you a quick snappable question, a very millennial question,
There it is.
which is, what do you think, if you just had to pick 3 words when it comes to driving success in marketing to today's women, what do you say those 3 things to keep in mind would be?
I would say you have to be impactful, memorable, and consistent in your messaging.
Great.
And what would you say your 3 are?
So I would say authentic,
Yep.
insightful, and relevant.
Awesome.
Oh, and can I add a 4th?
Sure.
I would say respectful as well. All right, well, thank you, Christina, and thank you, everyone, for joining us in this great conversation. It was a fantastic opportunity, and we look forward to seeing more in this series.